As many of you know, Israel has now declared war against Palestine after a huge terrorist attack during the Jewish holiday Simchat Torah and killed a lot of innocent people. You see in today's political scene, many people are supporting Palestine and Hamas. People in London, New York, and all over in the Western world are actually celebrating and are happy that this is happening. And it all roots back to people not knowing history. Like Ronald Reagan once said, the trouble with people is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. So today I'll explain the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and we're going to be going way back to 1300 BCE all the way up until today's event. I'm Solo, and this is a solo show. So the whole reason why I started this podcast was to inform and educate people. I realized that there was a ton of mis and disinformation floating around social media and also with the establishment media. So I decided to be the source where people could come to find out honest information and get my logical opinion on it. There's a lot of information that goes unspoken about in this particular topic. Most people say this conflict started in 1987 and go from there when explaining it, but in reality you have to go all the way back to biblical times, to 1300 BCE, when this story really starts. You also have to understand how small this piece of land is. It's slightly larger than New Jersey, so it was an extremely small state that they're fighting over. So Jewish history with the land of Israel began around 1300 BCE, and this is when Moses left Egypt around this time, and Joshua and the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River and Red Sea to Canaan, which is basically modern-day Israel. Fast forward about 300 years to 1000 BCE, the kingdom of David is established and Jerusalem is the capital. This is where the kingdom began on the world stage, still 1,000 years before Christ. Then in 1957 BCE, the first Temple of Solomon was built. So Jews were established like 1,400 years before Islam was even established. There was a conflict amongst Jews then, and there was a time of separation with the kingdom of Israel, which had 10 of the tribes. Then you have the south kingdom of Judah, which was governed by the Davidic line. Next, in 722 BCE, the Israelis exile them and rush them from the north, which is modern-day Lebanon. Then in 586 BCE, the exact same thing happened in the Babylonian exile, but they were able to conquer and destroy the first temple. In 515 BCE, there was this thing called the Great Return, where they built the second temple. Fast forward to 63 BCE, the Roman Empire took over, led by Pompey, took over Judea, and this land is not a vessel. And this land is not a vessel by the state, but instead a vessel by the Roman Empire. 70 CE is the destruction of Jerusalem, where the Jews revolted against the Romans because the Romans were not giving them basically religious freedom. All of Israel was destroyed along with the second temple that was built back in 515 BCE. Then there was a revolt from 130 to 136 CE by the Jews by a general that I won't even try to pronounce his name because it is really hard. But with this revolt, it was really tough for the Roman empires. They tried really hard. After a 6-year revolt, the Romans named it Palestine as an insult to the Jews who had unsuccessfully rebelled. During the 7th century CE, Islam was founded, and in 636 CE, Arabs took over Palestine. Then in 1099 and 1291, the Crusaders took back the land and were at war with the Islamic war. This is the time when the Crusaders took over Jerusalem and ruled Israel. When the Ottoman Empire and another Muslim empire ruled, beginning in 1517. From here all the way up to the First World War, it was not very dense in population. It was basically a desert, and the Ottomans did not allow any Jewish people to buy land, but Jewish people were able to do backdoor deals with the Arabs in the area for pieces of land. And this is the time where you see more and more Jews start occupying this area. The first holy movement back to the Promised Land happened in 1882. Fast forward 15 years, in 1897, the Zionist movement began. This is where the idea of an independent Jewish state in Israel by a guy named Theodor Herzl, who founded the World Zionist Organization. Then in 1917, Britain declared the Balfour Declaration, which said there would be no Jewish homeland in Israel, which also included modern-day Jordan. Oh, no, they said that would be, a Jewish homeland in Israel, which also included modern-day Jordan, as well as keeping the Arab states like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Lebanon. In 1920, this was the beginning of Arab pogroms in Jerusalem, which means basically it was organized massacre by the Arabs against the Jews. This was because the Jews wanted to pray at the Western Wall. Fast forward 2 years, in 1922, the British mandated over the area of Palestine. They basically walked back the Balfour Declaration and gave back Jordan to the Arabs. Then in 1937, the Peel Commission suggested that they split off land, and they did it really weird because they gave a bunch of weird slivers to the Jews and then the rest of the Arabs. But let me see, I lost my spot, sorry. And then a lot of Jews were moving to Israel around this time because of Europe's grow in anti-Semitism. This is where Israel started to actually grow economically and agriculturally because a lot of Jewish people with all their money and belongings moved here. And while this economy was growing, the Arabs also started to move back there because of this economic growth. Then in 1939, Britain restricted Jewish immigration to 75,000 Jewish people a year, hauling the millions of people who wanted to move here. They did this to allow the Arab population to grow here. Mind you, this is right before the Holocaust. This time, Arabs still weren't happy about Jewish people moving there, so both Britain and Jews faced very low-level attacks by the Arabs. Give me one quick sec. Okay, and then here you have the first big split during World War II. The Jews side with the British to fight. Alongside them, the Arabs side with Hitler. One of the Palestinian leaders at this time was meeting with Hitler to establish something new with the Holy Land once they conquered that area, which they came very close to. Hitler was able to actually control the surrounding states around Israel. Now, after World War II, Great Britain continued to restrict immigration into Israel, so the Arab versus the Jews conflict is very minimal. In 1947, there was a UN partition plan, since Britain did not want to govern Israel anymore, which would make Jerusalem an international territory, which would basically make it not Jewish nor Arab. It would just make it governed by international groups like the UN. The Jews were basically accepting whatever they could get, while the Arabs didn't want to and launched a bunch of small conflicts, and it was just a small and quiet war where it was basically the Jews defending themselves against the Arabs and the Arabs trying to kill the Jews. On May 14th, 1948, Israel declared independence, and in the Declaration of Independence itself, they asked the Arabs to stay along the lines of, we want to be an independent state, but we want all of our citizens to stay. We want the Arabs to stay and become citizens. Instead, all the Arabic countries declare war. And if you look on the map, Israel, if you don't know where Israel is on the world map, it's basically, you have the Mediterranean Sea right here, Israel, then above it is going to be Lebanon, then I believe it goes Jordan, Saudi Arabia, then you also have Egypt. And their goal was to basically, all these states the goal was just to wipe out the state of Israel, and that was not what ended up happening. Instead, the Jews retained everything except the old city of Jerusalem. In 1964, the creation of PLO, or Palestine Liberation Group, keep that in mind because I'm going to bring them up quite a bit, was formed, which was a terrorist group with the only goal of killing Jews. Keep in mind, there was no Palestinian state at this time. They were just trying to be liberated. So they were trying to be liberated by any state around them, like Jordan or Egypt, rather than just to destroy Israel. So the organization's whole point was to destroy Israel, not actually be liberated by any of the surrounding Arabic states. In 1967, the Six-Day War happened when the Arabic states declared war, and they expected it to be the last war where they could finally get rid of the Jewish state. The Jews knew this attack before it happened, so they decided to completely wreck through and start their own war before they were able to attack, and actually took out all those armies within 6 days and took back some land, expanded their territories, and so they essentially gained a little bit of territories from South Lebanon, and then also North Egypt. They were able to occupy all of that. And then in the same year, the Arab League Summit occurred, where all the Arabs agreed to to basically the three no's, which is no peace, no recognition, and no negotiation, which still occurs all the way up until today, which makes it impossible for a two-state solution because they're basically saying there's never going to be peace, there's never going to be recognition or negotiation. It's all or nothing for them. Fast forward to 1973, the Yom Kippur War, which is supposed to be a holy holiday for the Jews, where they all pray and are fasting while they're surprised with an attack from the Arabics, and Israel was completely caught off guard. There was a ton of casualties, but Israel was able to maintain their territories while also expanding in some smaller places. In 1979, the Camp David Accord occurred, which was a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, and Israel basically had to give up some of the land to Egypt that was previously occupied. But during this time, the Egyptian leader was assassinated. Jordan was afraid of the PLO during this time as well, and thought they were going to overthrow the government. And if you don't know, early Palestine was more in the center right of Jordan, like kind of right to the left of Jordan, while Jordan then pushed them all the way north to the south of Lebanon during this time because they thought the PLO was going to overthrow them. And around this time, Palestine started launching missiles into Israel from South Lebanon. Then in 1982, Israel engaged in a war with Lebanon, and Israel was very successful, making it all the way to the capital and occupying essentially the whole country, but had to withdraw because of international pressure. In 1987, the first Intifada breaks out in 1991, which consists of a bunch of riots and terrorist attacks. The Prime Minister at this time was pressured by George W. Bush to negotiate with the Palestine Liberation Organization, which again is an organization that is a terrorist group whose leader at this time killed hundreds among thousands of innocent people. Then in 1993, they signed the Oslo Records, which was horrible and was supposed to be at the time peace, but the PLO instead upped the violence in Israel. In 1988, again, Israel tried to come to an agreement to let them govern because Israel did not want to govern these very dangerous parts and wanted to separate from them. Basically, Israel was, the city of Jerusalem. They wanted places around there. They didn't really want the Gaza Strait. They didn't want Gaza City. They didn't want north of Lebanon because if they occupied these areas, it was very dangerous from the Arabs because of their soldiers were basically going to get attacked. They wanted them to govern themselves. Fast forward to 2000, Israel and the PLO leader meet again at the Camp David summit to negotiate. And again, this time a new prime minister, though, basically gives up everything and even tries to establish a Palestinian state. But even this great deal, the leader of PLO declined and instead launched a bunch of attacks until 2005. This again shows Palestine had no interest in a two-state agreement because even when giving everything that they wanted or thought they wanted, they still said no to it and refused and instead upped the violence once again. Around this time, they retreated from the Gaza, Israel retreated from the, take a step back. In 2004, a new leader was in charge of the PLO. He is a terror supporter and not really a step up from the last leader that killed thousands of people. And then in 2004, a new leader was in charge. And around this time, Israel retreated from the Gaza Strip and gave it back to the Palestinians, but Hamas, a terrorist group, went in and destroyed everything the Jews built at the time, which included things like greenhouses and a bunch of the infrastructure like homes. They burned them and destroyed them to the ground. Then in 2006, Hamas won the election. So to recap, the Israelis gave the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians. Then they held a election, and the first thing that they do is elect the terrorist group to rule over them. And then there was another negotiation where the Prime Minister of Israel gives even more than the last Prime Minister in 2000. And the one ask he did was ask basically for big Jewish settlements. The PLO leader didn't even counteroffer. He just walked away from the negotiation table. And then again, just as you know it, in 2008, the Gaza war began with missiles from Gaza and Israel to Israel, and Israel went into Gaza, shut it down. Then the second Gaza war began in 2014 with another rocket attack from Hamas, and the same exact thing happened, and Israel went again to go shut it down. Then the third war happened in 2021, same exact thing as you might remember from the last two. And then if you look back on 2021, a lot of people were talking that it was over land disputes in the city of Jerusalem, but this is completely false. The leader of Palestine at the time was holding an election, and he thought he was going to lose to Hamas, so he launched this attack thinking he would win the election and be like, look, I killed more Jews than Hamas. Elect me your leader. Fast forward to October 7th, 2023, during the Jewish holiday Simchat Torah, when Orthodox Jews do not use electronics like phones, computers, laptops, anything like that. Palestinians launch an attack by first launching a huge missile attack. And if you don't know, in Israel, they're kind of used to this. They went to underground bunkers. And during this time, while the missiles were landing, there was paragliders going into a Jewish rave and killing hundreds of people and raping the women there. Again, along at this time, a bunch of Hamas members were breaking through the barriers, protecting Israel from Palestine. And this was a very sophisticated attack. They were also doing a cyber attack at this time, basically turning off all of the electronics at the wall so Israel wasn't notified when people were breaking through. And at these walls or at the borders, there was limited military personnel because, again, it was a Jewish holiday and it was completely planned. We don't know yet how long ago they planned this, but this was very sophisticated. This wasn't just a very fast thought of let's go attack. This was very premeditated. Thousands of people were dying. This was one of the worst days for Jewish people since the Holocaust. And people of Palestine from all over the world have been cheering, celebrating Hamas's killing the Jews to the point where they're thanking Allah, which is their God, if you don't know. And I'm sorry, if your God is okay with you raping, killing, and kidnapping women and children, then your religion is nowhere near the right of religion. God is supposed to be holy, peaceful, and not evil. That is being conducted by Hamas. The same day, Israel declared war and started to attack Gaza, and I believe in the coming weeks, Israel will wipe Gaza off the map. This is, again, one of the worst days for Jews since the Holocaust. And then the difference between Israel and Palestine is Israel urges Palestinians, after declaring war, to get out of Gaza so they don't harm innocent people. And when they actually do launch missiles to destroy buildings, they do a missile beforehand called I think it's called like a knock warning, where the rocket hits and it just shakes the building, telling people, hey, this is going to be basically missile down. Get out now. They even call up the property managers and the people who are running these buildings saying, hey, get everybody out. We're going to blow up this building. But people running these buildings basically say, go ahead, do it. We don't care. We're going to basically use it as propaganda to show how bad you guys are. And the Palestinian leadership and Hamas basically use women and children frequently as human shields. They build a lot of their military operations below hospitals, churches, and it's basically just using them as shields. So it's absolutely horrendous. Tomorrow I'll get more in detail into this attack that's happening from Saturday, and so far the declaration of war and how this all happened, and just a more in-depth story about what's happening today. But this was just an in-depth history behind the conflict and a lot of misinformation. I'm just clearing up a lot of misinformation that's been going around in the media. Thank you guys for watching. Just leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and send your prayers to Israel, hoping for the safety of everyone.